Right now, I mean, we have what we say a framework. I think sometimes a framework is a very bad name because it's gives you one direction of what it is, and it's not really a framework. Another way would say that it's a map, it's a compass for seeing what inner development is. And I think what's happening right now is that people have been able to receive a language which is easier how to talk about inner development. And I think that's the beauty of inner development goals, is the language, is the simplicity of us being brave enough for saying that, yes, it's complex, but let's try.
Welcome to Purposeful Empathy, a show that is dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from across the globe who understand the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. This season includes 25 incredible episodes devoted to the inner development goals. Based on the science of personal transformation, the IDG framework represents 23 skills needed for today's world. And of course, empathy is one of them. You won't want to miss a single episode, so hit the subscribe button now. Thanks for watching and enjoy the show. Welcome to a new episode of Purposeful Empathy. Today I'm joined by Caroline Stiernstedt Sahlborn, a leading voice in human development, mental health, and systems change. She is Secretary General of 1825, a center dedicated to improving the mental health of young adults in Stockholm, and is the co-initiator of Next in Mind, a Nordic-wide revolution in mental well-being for emerging adults. With more than 2 decades experience working across systems change and philanthropy, Caroline brings deep insight into how we can create meaningful, lasting change. At the heart of all she does is a belief in the power of inner development to unlock social transformation. In light of this, she also serves as chair of the Inner Development Goals, a global initiative working to cultivate the kind of leadership competencies we need to achieve the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. On this podcast, I have spent the first half of 2025 in conversations with leading researchers and practitioners of the 23 IDG skills, and I've invited Caroline to be the season's final guest to discuss the future of the movement. Welcome to the show, Caroline.
Thank you. I'm so impressed you can say all of this.
I'm impressed because I'm saying it about you. You're the one who's lived that bio. So it's a delight to chat with you, and I'm a bittersweet that we're at the end of this series because I've had the most extraordinary conversations with people who are on the cutting edge of all these different competencies. And it's so delightful to meet somebody who's so deeply enmeshed in the IDG movement. So thank you for making the time. Now that I've introduced you by way of bio, I think it's always a nice way to get to know the person by way of, tell me about your life. So what do you think you'd want to share so that people could understand what makes you passionate about your work and anything else about you on a personal level that would provide some insight?
It's always a hard question. And even if you think ahead, you never know what comes out, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like,
Good start.
so what should come out right now? I mean, first of all, it comes out that I'm a mother. I'm
Mm.
a mother of three kids, 2 boys and a girl. And I think part of that is it's been my evolution of being a mother. What does nurture, belonging, becoming really means, and in what way am I doing that? And in what ways is also sometimes hindering me, or I feel, constrained, or
Mm.
hard things happens, etc. On the other hand, if you ask other people, I think it's engagement. I truly care about us as humans. I think we have huge potential,
Mm.
and I mourn and I sorrow when I feel that we're not operating on our best.
Mm. Mm. I really feel you. Wow, I'm very touched by that right at the beginning of our conversation.
Mm.
Um, Thank you for sharing that. And I know that you're deeply, deeply engaged in youth mental health, right? Through the organizations that you are part of. And maybe as a result of raising three children, you're seeing what's happening as children are growing up in the world and what's happening to them. I wonder if you could share why you're so deeply committed to this topic. And given the work that you do, two sides of the same coin, what do you find worrying? And where is there a little bit of hope in this space?
Mm. I think I'm right now involved in emerging adults, the young adults, those that are in the age in between, those that are pretty soon within maybe 10 or 20 years, they are our leaders.
Mhm.
And what we can see right now that those are suffering. If you look at the different populations and you look at the groups, we can see that this age group is actually suffering more than others. Doesn't mean that they are more important than our children or grandparents or whatever, us, but they suffer. And what we can see is that suicide rate among this age group is going up higher. Depression, anxiety, they are the first generation that actually live within the climate change and feel it within it and been brought up by it. And I think the signs that we see among this group is that not everyone, it's also very, a lot of good signs. But I think if we ask them and we can see as a general, the sense of hope is going down. Sense of belonging, sense of how to make meaning of life is going down. Then I think we as an adult have actually failed. So what is it within our society, the structure, how we build community, have we failed if we can't help them do the transition and want to engage in the world that is coming?
Mm.
And that's what's worrying me. But it's also, if I look at the positive side, and I look at my daughter or my son and their friends, and you can see there is also a lot of positive energy going out there. They are sometimes, I'm blown away if I meet emerging adults, how much wiser they are than I was in that age.
Mhm.
So it's also contradiction, but I also feel that sometimes we haven't given them the tools to connect,
Mm.
to truly connect to who they are, the other, their peers, or the planet.
Mm.
And that worries me.
Mm. You know, an anecdote, like a memory just came into my mind as recently as this weekend. My husband and we were out for a walk. Montreal has Grand Prix, has one of the races. And so it was last weekend. It was a beautiful summer, like early summer weekend in Montreal after a very long, hard winter. So everybody was out and you could just feel the city alive. And so we were promenading, and there was a group of kids that were clearly of high school age, probably going to their high school graduation prom, all the gowns and the makeup and the hair. And I was really sad to see a young woman who had the scars of many, 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 many cuts across all of her arms, both sides. And my daughter's 9 and paying attention to things like that now. And we had a conversation about why that was the case. And on one hand, I felt like maybe the girl is in a better place now that she's not covering her arms. So she's maybe integrated some of her earlier experiences. But nonetheless, I had to explain to my daughter what cutting is about and why some young people might do that. And so I'm really deeply touched by the commitment you have and to help uplift emerging adults. I sense it from my own classroom. I've been teaching undergrads for nearly 15 years, and they're, super competent and intelligent. And to get into the university, they have to have, done very well in their academics. But just below the surface is all that stuff that you're talking about. And one of the things that I've noticed the most, besides mental health issues, is the lack of agency, that they just don't feel like they're agents of their own life and their own destiny in the world. So,
And I think that is a tool that we both know that you can train that muscle. But if you also then add mental health problems and you have wounds, traumas, or been affected since you were little,
Mm.
it's so much harder.
Yeah.
And so, when all of these enter the universities or, vocational schools in the best case, but we have also many that are left outside. They're lonely, that are not employed or in education and feel more lonely than ever. And what about those? And of course, if you are left lonely too long, it's also anger. And we know that anger is danger. So, and I think, we can look around the world right now, how much anger it is out there. So what is it that we, give them in order to see hope, to see that they can engage? And what you say, agency, and that means, the capabilities of acting,
Mm.
but not acting for the sake of yourself, in the sake of you and your community.
Okay, so let's transition a bit. What do you find compelling about the IDGs? Because here you are, chair of the organization, and you've got a really interesting background. So what is it that drew you into that orbit?
I was actually, I've been part of this movement for almost a bit over 10 years. Um, and when I first worked in around 2014, we talked about, what is conscious development? And that was a really hard word. In Sweden, nobody hardly understood when you talked about consciousness. So looking back, things have happened in terms of neuroscience, adult development, psychology, inner development, and so on. And I think it's also recognizing that the wisdom traditions have, we have a lot of experience if you go back in history in terms of human development. But we were curious about at that time was in what way can we actually support the human development in earlier stages of life? So usually, part of human development comes very natural when you are in the mid-age because you start to think about the next phase of your life. So many of us who turned 40, 50, 60, you are in that and you start your next transition, very natural. But what about if we can start that at the age of you being a young adult, and really see if we can do that, in what way can we also then support the human development to take wiser decisions for yourself and the community and the planet. And back then we thought about, looking at what kind of skills can you train to do that? And very early we call them super skills, a very bad word. And we looked at, what has within the literature, within the science, within the wisdom traditions, are there any commonalities among that, looking at what skills? Then on the other hand, you have the whole movement of planetary issues and climate crisis and social crisis. And I think then it was a very nice, a meeting where we said, is there a way of combining this? And so my engagement really come from human development in terms of us as humans. What skills do we need in order to be more empathic or compassionate? Go back to the inner, but not just for the sake of myself, but for the sake of what's really needed.
Yeah. And through all of these interviews, the each skill in and of itself, I now understand why it's so important to the framework as a whole. And I have much more appreciation for the framework as a whole.
Can I interview? Because I would love to learn how you look at this and how you think about it. I think your learning must be amazing.
It has been. I've been introduced to some extraordinary people, and so often the interviews would shed light on other skills and the fact that they're so interconnected and related. And I think obviously from a communications vehicle, you have them in five different pillars. But I think there's so many visual ways that we could a metaphor of a circle where there's all moving together. There's no start, no end, yes, and keep revisiting and going deeper down. Yeah, spiral. Yeah, so many. I've had many revelations doing these interviews. But I think since we're closing this series, I'd like to go back to where I began, which is if somebody has never heard of the IDGs, all right? So somebody's listening right now, they don't know the inner development goals, why it exists, why it's important, and what the plan is. Could you share just, the origin story about why you think this came to be and is so important, what the organization is trying to accomplish, what the vision is, so that we might invite some people to join the movement?
Yeah, definitely. I think the background is in one way very simple. We're not succeeding with the outer complexity challenges that we have. In some ways we are, because there are many positive things as well, but we can also see it's not happening at a speed that we need. And in what way, what is standing in the way? So if we look at that, the standing in the way, I think it's our own way of being, of our own way of understanding. So the background is really, in a very easy ways, if we should change the way we act, well, how do we change the way we also think about that and also be in that? That means that we have to change the whole body system. So looking at you then, of course, you ask yourself, what kind of skills do we then need in order for us to change our minds and change the way we act and be together? And looking at it, and then you can say, if we think that the skills that we are born with, they're good. I mean, we know that the inner things, if it's clean, it's there, it's beauty. But why? What skills can we also add on that we haven't trained? And how can you train them? So we also, thought about, really thinking about what are the transformational skills that is needed in order for us to raise our level of consciousness. So that's really the background. Then what's happening is that, of course, we asked ourselves, how do we know what kind of skills is that? So we did a lot of, and you heard this stories now many times, we went out asking. But of course, you can then, who can you ask about this? Who is the experts? And humble, I say, I think in one way, it's each human being that has that. If we are put in a place where we can reflect. On the other hand, there are people who have already knowledge about this from different fields. So we thought about, or we asked several scientists from different fields to come together and help us understand. And they answered the survey. And then we asked experts in sustainability and experts in human development and experts in HR also to think about what are the skills necessary to tackle the big challenges we have. And based on that, we came up with an embryo of what you can say a set of skills. And with that, we have had then several scientists' intervention to see how do you pull them together to build this. And right now, I mean, we have what we say a framework. I think sometimes a framework is a very bad name because it gives you one direction of what it is. And it's not really a framework. Another way would say that it's a map, it's a compass for seeing what inner development is. And I think what's happening right now is that people have been able to receive a language which is easier how to talk about inner development. And I think that's the beauty of inner development goals, is the language, is the simplicity of us being brave enough for saying that, yes, it's complex, but let's try to see if we would this be of supportive for us about talking about inner development.
Yeah, I love that frame of compass. I haven't even, I wasn't conscious that I was giving it a metaphor, but I've always described the framework as 23 invitations because I
Love
think
it.
people can be attracted. The gateway into this conversation can be through co-creation if they're really excited about teamwork. It could be through
presence, if there's a need for more presence, and you recognize, oh, if I stilled my brain for a bit and I stilled my body, like what could open up? Like, so that's why I call it 23 invitations. But thank you for the compass. I like that too.
I love the invitation, because if who are we then in the IDG? If you look at it, can we be in the service business? So what are you good at if you are in a hospitality, business? You're very good in invitation, but also building trust. If you are a hostess or not a hostess, if you're a host on a dinner, how do you invite people to the table? How do you build that trust, the feeling of come together? And I think that's the beauty now, is that we can convene and become a catalyst together.
Just before our conversation, I interviewed an IDG hub coordinator in Uganda by the name of Morris, who told me that he's working with farmers, and he says if we develop the inner self, the inner landscape, the food will be healthier and will be more sustainable. Isn't that beautiful?
Oh, it's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think there's so many out there that sees this, that sees the potential. And I think that's the beauty. But also I feel, I'm sure there's something that comes up, is there are so many out there and they also feel sometimes lonely. So in what way could also the IDD right now, support
community?
This? Yeah.
Community building, capacity building, but community building at the same time. Yeah, I
for
agree.
the catalyst. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if you see any connection between the work that you're doing with emerging youth and mental health and the IDGs, because those seem like there's some overlap, but what would you say to that?
I think that's what made me go deeper into working with my mental health. I clearly also see that we all have wounds, and the wounds can be a point of growth, a point of possibilities, but it also can be a point of a barrier for human development. So I think that with us not understanding, not support the mental health, that will actually hinder us for the inner development. So for me, it's very natural to see that it's almost like the same or different sides of the same coin.
And I think sorry.
No, please.
Well, I don't know. I think I'm doing too much talking on this podcast. I don't know.
Can we switch?
Hilarious. I've found that the timing right now is what we're incubating is the marriage between cutting edge research about brain development and human potential, also understanding what it means to have trauma-informed healing, somatic work, intergenerational work. So all of this cutting edge research that fully echoes what wisdom traditions have been saying forever. Like not to uplift one conversation over another, but I will share a conversation that I had with Dr. Jean Bolton, who is a physicist, a quantum physicist from Cambridge and Harvard. I mean, a scientist who does complexity science. And she wrote a book called The Tao of Complexity, because one of her mentors, who also is a quantum physicist, said, you must read this book that's 2,500 years old, and it is saying what the cutting edge quantum physics is showing. So I think we're at this moment. And, you also mentioned at the very beginning of the conversation that we need to slow down, but it's because the pace of change and so much is happening. And I want to uplift it. I've got it I'm pointing to something on the side of my wall. It says, I can't read it because there we go. The times are urgent. Let's slow down. Bio Akomalefe, right? It just, I don't know.
It's beauty. And I think that quote has been used by many of us engaged in this movement. And I'm wondering, what does he think about it?
What does he think about your movement?
But us using it, because there is wisdom in there. And I also feel that the movement and the pace of how we have worked has been so fast because, and it's been faster than we within the system has been able to catch up with. So the perception of the IDG is that it's moving very, very fast. And that people, and I think that's also the hard part, that is with the pain of us working within it. So when you read that, I also feel a little bit pain and responsible because I feel that it's so true. And right now, in a way, sometimes we're not walking the talk in that saying from the IDG.
I really appreciate that self-awareness. And it's calling, I've been doing interviews with IDG hub coordinators and asking the question, what are your critiques or what do you think the limitations are of the IDGs? And I mean, everybody who is taking a leadership role as a hub coordinator appreciates the IDGs. So they're not dismissive of the IDGs, they're uplifting the IDGs. At the same time, they recognize that there's so many growing pains and there's so many tensions within the movement that is flourishing. So it's like, the IDGs have touched an acupuncture point that is so desperately needed in our public discourse and in our hearts.
Yeah.
And then people are immediately finding interest and passion for it, but can the organism keep up with the pace of scale? And is it distorting as it's morphing, as it's evolving? And that's what you're talking about, right?
Exactly. And I think that's also why we actually told ourselves now, it's really, really time to really slow down. Not to not disengage, but to also allow ourselves to pause what can be paused and to rethink what structure can the IDG or what structure should we have in order for us to serve what is becoming? Almost like, what kind of structure will serve the dance? So, the dance that the dance of convening, the dance of becoming a catalyst, or for catalytic change, the dance for maybe supporting the next generation, and of course within that supporting the planet, the Mother Earth, within the skills. So, and in order for us to start to dance with each member within the hubs and network, with the centers, with all of them, in what way do we need to reorganize ourselves? Because I also feel, and it's very natural because of the growth and the pace, it's also been very tough for many people. And I really, really feel that pain. And, when people say, I want to join, and then where do I join? How can I get engaged? And it's nowhere on the receiving part of saying, here is where you can engage. And then we have so many beauty examples where, you have the hubs and network who've been just, people coming together saying, I want to form a hub. And with this almost now 800 hubs, it's beauty. But it's also to recognizing and being humble to say, what's happening? Can we allow ourselves now to look at this and see what is a good supporting structure going forward?
And I think that's something I would probably want to highlight about the leadership team that I've witnessed anyways, is that there seems to be an earnest self-awareness about these profound questions and ways of being, so that you're living in concordance and alignment with the framework in and of itself. I remember being at the conference, I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago, but everybody was on their phone answering questions about what are the pain points. Like, let's not, it basically was maybe half an hour of the whole programming of 3 days, but like, let's not fake the fact that it's not perfect. And so let's share what we think are shadows, if that's the word. I don't remember what word was used on stage. And very quickly, the information was put up on, and you can almost predict, right? Like, it's a Western, northern, the global north There's not enough Indigenous voices, too much of maybe status quo, not transformational enough, like, different critiques, let's say. And then the invitation was talk with a partner in the audience about this. And I remember having this feeling that it was so gratifying to almost put the dirty laundry out there, because it for me, what it showed was, if I live my life and I'm trying to do something from a place of earnest commitment to elevating empathic consciousness. So let's say that's my mission. And as I do it, there'll be plenty of reasons to critique me. I'm flying across the ocean to go to a conference. How can that be helpful for the planet? I'm rude to somebody one day on one of my bad days. How can I possibly be writing a book about empathy when I'm not living it all the time? All that stuff. And I came to the conclusion that if we live held down by the shame we would feel by the critiques, we never get anything done. But if we acknowledge that we're still works in progress, and we're in real time going to adjust because we still want to come back to the sincere desire we have to effect positive change in the world, that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things I love hearing that you say what you've just said is that, I'm very keen to see it pick up momentum in North America. But I know how easily it could be canceled too, be ripped apart. But I love the fact that the organization recognizes that we too want to still be of service and not just, be taken, hijacked by the success.
No, I don't think so. I think there is a humbleness, and there's so much beauty and engagement within, and that's where I'm curious about to hear with all of your interviews to see what are the words using, where is really the energy from here? What's the longing? I'm super curious to hear you speak about that from all of your interviews. And I see a need for us within the core and within the broader context of what's out there, is to identify and allow for emergence of a new culture, you could say, that could enable us to do even more of walking the talk. And one thing which I do think is so it's about infrastructure, it's about organizational model, supportive infrastructure, it's about convening and relational skills. And many things more. But I think that's part of what I would like us to come together about. And that's why we need to slow down. And slow down doesn't mean shutting down or disempower or, but it's also by allowing ourselves to reflect on what's happened so far and what is it that we can do even better.
Yeah, because when we think about our own organism, the more we learn about the vagus nerve and how it needs time to flip from parasympathetic to sympathetic, right? So our bodies are able to flood with cortisol and stress hormones when we're in a situation where we need a spurt of energy, right? Or when we're under some form of threat. But if we're always activated from that place, we will fry ourselves like bacon, right? Whereas we need to have slow down periods for our bodies to come back into equilibrium, for us to integrate and soothe. So it feels like that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and I think it's also natural. And the other thing is, I think we still have lots of work to be done.
Yeah.
In terms of, we're nobody near the possibilities here, and also to work with the engagement on what is really inner development now going forward, and in what way could that be part of government organizations, big organizations, community building, stuff like that. How do we support that?
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about this summit that's coming up. This is launching in July. The summit's happening in October. What's the plan? What's the theme? What's the dream?
The summit is coming up, and it's coming up the 16th to 18th of October in Stockholm. Again, we are gathering, a massive number of people and organizations from different walks of life, from civil society to government organizations to corporates, to activists, to leaders, business leaders, etc. So I think it's really the beauty of having the diversity in the room. And the theme this year is space in between. And I really think, for me, that is exactly the theme that we need right now. What is it within the in between? You can also say another way of, what is it that I don't yet see, but I have to hold? And I think looking at, for example, a word that for me is so present every day is that we talk about polarities, and we talk about how hard it is of being, the world is made out of different polarities, and you almost get, you hinder yourself towards, because you don't have to deal with the polarities that we have. But what about if we change our mindset and say, being in a living learning system, it's all about polarities.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of looking at them as a hinder, how can we actually accept them and work with that? And in the space in between, it's also finding that little space of pausing that we talked about, of me sensing something and then before acting. What is it there? It's where the wisdom lies. And how can we capture that? And of course, if you think about that, how can we also train that muscle?
Mm. Mm.
So
Yeah.
I'm super excited, and I think it's going to be a great learning experience. Oh, and I really hope we get as many of diverse perspectives as possible.
Mm. Yes, I wish that. I'm excited to be going. So what would you say to anybody who's listening that is very, very curious now about the IDGs or wants to get involved? How would you like to nudge them to engagement?
I think, first of all, check our website, the innerdevelopmentgoals.org. But the second thing is I think a great starting point is to actually attend the summit.
Mm.
It's a great entry point to just feel the vibe of what's happening, why so many people have come together under the theme of inner development. And the other thing is to check out, who's the nearest hub where you live? Can you get engaged in that?
Mm.
And then the other thing I would say is join a learning journey with somebody, because there is plenty of people who have started learning journeys, either for their individual journey or for their organization's company or whatever. Join that, become part of that. Because and another thing is, not even if the word goal is in the name, it's not an ending.
Mm.
It's a journey, and it's the spiral. We're entering a compass or a map together. And in what way can this compass be of benefit for you?
Love it. Love it. And of course, people can come to Stockholm to attend the summit, but there's also live watch parties and the IDG hub if you're looking for
I
one.
know, yeah, Stockholm is for you is Montreal is very far away, but of course, yeah, join the digital. If it's too much of a hassle to come to Stockholm, please enter the digital. We also have, if you think it's too expensive or have other limitations, there's plenty of ways of how you can still find probably solutions for that to join. And I've seen in some of the summits, I've seen beauty of people coming together on a tea party and watching the summit together.
Absolutely. And we'll have in the show notes to here links so that you can do that. We'll have a link to the IDG Hub map so you can see where all the 800 and growing. I think my understanding is more than one per day is the track record, which is really quite remarkable. So we'll have that all in the show notes. And of course, anybody who's interested in learning more can go back to episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to this one and rewatch again.
Okay, so I know what I had to do this summer then is to like a 100-day challenge.
Sweet. My last question, and what a delight, Caroline. Thank you so much for spending part of your Wednesday with me taping this. It is a podcast devoted to empathy. And so I always end my conversation with my guests with the same question, which is, if you can think of a time in your life when you were on the receiving end of empathy and what that meant for you.
You did pre-send this question to me. And I mean, the quickest thing that came into mind was your email this morning. You know, just saying, you nudged me and said, you know, hey, we don't know each other. This is the first time. Still, you took the time and sent me an email. Have you checked this organization? They're having a grant for your mental health clinic. And for me, this is an act of empathy. It's about acting of caring that you thought about that. And so for me, it's also an act of how can I acknowledge and be grateful for all the small empathy acts that you receive each day. And the more you helped me think about this, because then on my bike to the work this morning, one of my dear great friends who has also been advisor to the IDG also called me and said, hey, Caroline, I know that you are now in an elected chair. So tell me about what's your plan and tell me how I can be of support. And by just asking there and helping me reflect made me feel not so lonely in this. And also feel that, oh, we're many that taking this on our shoulders and share the experience of wanting and wishing the best of the IDG. So for me, it's also what IDG is all about. What's in the core of IDG, of human development or inner development? It's the heart. It's our ability to care. And for me, the ability to care, compassion, empathy. Without that, I mean.
Thank you for saying that. My takeaways from, I always love this question. I never know what I'm going to get. Sometimes I hear very profound stories of a nurse at the bedside of a parent who went above and beyond. And by the end of the call, we're both wiping away tears and so many different stories. And no matter what I hear, I'm always reminded that there's an opportunity to turn up the volume of empathy in our lives because we have no idea what others are going through. We have no idea the impact we can have with small gestures like you just described. But if we do, that has a residual, it has sort of a contagion impact. You know, you are going to be kinder to someone as a result of feeling supported and heard. And I think there's just so much more space in our lives and in the world for more kindness, more compassion, more empathy.
And that was one of the first questions I asked when we built the IGD in many years. You know, I said to one of our conversations with the corporates, you know, how can you build a kinder organization? And of course, sometimes the word kind is hard for people to, you know, but it's the empathy, is the way of acting with empathy, which you then can call compassion. But I mean, for me, that's the essence of us. And if we don't build the communities out of that, you know, we build it on other aspects. But the core is really to care. And we know that when you care, you also become wiser, you become more, you train the muscle of hope, you train your muscle of bravery. So it comes with so many other things. So I love the work. I'm going to read your book now.
Which you can see. I feel always so disoriented when I see them in behind me, but I know that I'm supposed to keep it up there. Okay. I want to thank you for the work you do. I look forward to meeting you in person in Stockholm.
Likewise, thank you.
I look forward to ongoing engagement. I want to thank everybody who's been watching or listening, and I want to wish you a good day and look forward to seeing you next week at Purposeful Empathy.
If you know someone who'd benefit from this episode, please share it with them. Post the link on your socials and hit the subscribe button now. The world needs more empathy, and you have an important role to play.